The stars over the outer colonies always looked peaceful, but Admiral Rhea Marlowe knew that peace in space was a lie. She stood at the command deck of the ISS Resolute, staring at the shifting patterns of light on the sensor displays. The ship had been on routine patrol near the edge of charted space when the signal appeared. At first, the crew thought it was nothing more than static, a burst of radiation from a nearby star. But then the signal repeated. It was faint, broken by interference and stretched across multiple frequencies. Yet within the noise there were words. So, assistance. Extinction. Help. It was not human. The language carried a tone and rhythm that was unfamiliar. The ship's translation matrix struggled to piece it together, but the meaning became clear. A distress call. Someone out there was crying for help. The deck grew silent. Humans had met many alien species over the last century, but never had they received a signal of such desperation. Most alien civilizations stayed distant from humanity, whispering stories of their dangerous nature. After all, humans came from Earth, a world known across the stars as a death world, a place of violent storms, crushing predators, and endless natural disasters. To aliens, humanity was a people forged in chaos and struggle, and that reputation made them both feared and avoided. Yet here was proof. Someone was reaching out to them. Commander Elias Tran, standing beside Rhea, adjusted the feed. It's looping. Whoever sent this must be repeating it across every channel they can reach. Location? Rhea asked, her voice calm but sharp. Sector Epsilon 94. That's deep beyond the border zones, Elias replied. We'd need to push the engines hard, maybe 2 weeks' travel. The Admiral folded her arms. She was known throughout the fleet as a woman of iron focus, someone who had survived battles where others would have surrendered. But she was also known for listening to her people. Now, the crew looked at her, waiting for her judgment. The bridge was alive with quiet debate. It could be a trap, Lieutenant Kale muttered. Pirates, maybe. Or worse, one of the machine enclaves. Or it could be real, said Ensign Tova, the youngest officer aboard. Her voice carried both fear and hope. If they're desperate enough to broadcast blindly, they might be facing something bigger than pirates. Rhea's mind sharpened as she weighed the possibilities. Traps were common. Desperation, though, that was harder to fake. Her gut told her the signal was no lie. Put it on a secure line, she ordered. We'll send it to High Command. The Resolute's message reached the heart of humanity's Frontier Council within hours. Leaders from across the colonies gathered in a massive holographic chamber, their forms flickering in light. Military officers, governors, and representatives argued fiercely over the signal. Some dismissed it outright. Why should we risk our ships and our lives for strangers? Asked Governor Asher. We have our own colonies to protect. Humanity has only just begun to spread its wings among the stars. Why get tangled in someone else's war? Others leaned forward, eyes intense. Because this is who we are, countered Admiral Yoren, one of Rhea's rivals but also her ally in spirit. We are survivors. If these aliens are facing extinction and we turn our backs, what kind of future are we building? One of fear? Or one of courage? The debate raged for hours. Humanity's reputation weighed heavily on them. Many alien civilizations had watched from a distance, labeling humans as reckless and dangerous. But what if this was a chance to change that story? What if this was their opportunity to show the galaxy that humanity was more than its violent origins? Finally, the Council voted. Narrowly but decisively, a mission would be launched. Humanity's Deathworlder fleet, their most hardened armada forged in the harshest campaigns, would respond. Not with promises, not with hesitation, but with action. Back aboard the Resolute, Rhea received the Council's order. You are authorized, the message said. Proceed to Sector Epsilon 94. Investigate the source of the distress call. Assist if possible. And above all, show them what humanity stands for. Rhea's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. It was not joy, but something sharper. Resolve. She turned to her officers. You heard command, she said. Set a course. Double shift the engine crews. We're going to see who's crying out for help. A murmur ran through the deck. Some voices carried excitement, others unease. But there was no hesitation. Humanity had been called, and humanity would answer. The journey to Sector Epsilon 94 was long and tense. The fleet, 3 heavy cruisers, 6 escorts, and 2 carrier groups, moved through uncharted space like wolves prowling through a dark forest. Every jump carried risk. Unknown anomalies shimmered in the void. Signals flickered at the edge of detection. During the voyage, Rhea kept her crew sharp. She made rounds, speaking with soldiers in the barracks, pilots in the hangars, and engineers deep in the reactor cores. "Admiral," one young Marine asked her as she passed. "Why us? Why did Command send the Deathworlder fleet? Wouldn't diplomats have been better?" Rhea paused. Her gaze was steady but not unkind. "Because if the stories about humans are true," she said, "then we are exactly what they need. Not words, not promises, but people who do not break when the universe tries to crush them." The Marine nodded slowly, understanding more in that moment than any speech could give. At the end of the second week, the fleet arrived. Sensors lit up immediately. The system was a graveyard. Planets once rich with oceans and forests were burned black. Space was littered with shattered stations, broken satellites, and the twisted remains of ships. The light of the system's sun barely pierced the smoke clouds drifting across space, and in the middle of the ruins, the signal pulsed again. SOS. Assistance. Extinction. Help. The crew stared at the screens in silence. For all their expectations, the reality was worse. Whoever had sent the message was surrounded by destruction. "Life signs?" Rhea asked. "Small clusters," Elias replied, his voice tight. "One station still has survivors, barely holding together. Atmosphere loss, power almost gone. If we don't act soon, they'll be gone within days." Rhea took a breath, steady and cold. This was no trap. This was no trick. This was a civilization on the edge of death. She looked around the command deck. Every officer, every soldier, every engineer on the ship was watching her, waiting for her order. "Prepare rescue teams," Rhea said. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "We're going in." The shuttles launched within the hour, cutting through the debris field with precision. Human Marines moved with steady calm, their suits built for environments that would have killed others instantly. Where alien lungs would collapse in the vacuum leaks, humans pressed forward. Where the temperature fell far below freezing, their gear kept them moving. Inside the station, the survivors, thin, pale beings with luminous eyes, stared in shock as humans entered. For a moment, both sides simply looked at each other. To the aliens, humans were everything the stories had described. Tall, scarred, and wearing armor like walking fortresses. But then, one human Marine, helmet retracted, extended a hand. His expression was serious but not cruel. "We heard your call," he said simply. "We're here to help." For the Veyari, the last survivors of a dying world, it was the first spark of hope in months, and for humanity, it was the first step into a story that would echo across the stars. The message from Earth spread quickly among the survivors of the Cathari. For weeks they had known nothing but despair, and now there was a voice that promised hope. But with that hope came confusion. Who were these humans? In their libraries, the Cathari had stored records from across the galaxy. They had archives collected over centuries, scientific journals, fragments of treaties, explorers' logs. When the elders searched those records for Earth, they found only scattered notes. And what they discovered filled them with both wonder and fear. Earth was labeled a death world. In galactic classification, planets were ranked by danger. Most advanced civilizations lived on Class 3 or Class 4 worlds, stable environments with mild climates and few predators. The strongest empires had come from Class 5 worlds, places where survival required strength but not desperation. Earth was a Class 12. No one truly understood how humans had survived there at all. Their world was a storm of challenges, vast oceans that birthed hurricanes strong enough to shatter cities, continents filled with mountains, deserts, and frozen tundras, forests alive with predators, insects carrying plagues, and plants that poisoned the unwary. Volcanoes shook the land, earthquakes split the ground, and rivers flooded without mercy. Winters froze, summers burned, and the planet spun on as if testing its children every day. Yet somehow humanity had endured. Captain Sorrel of the Cathari fleet studied the reports with disbelief. "They should not exist," he murmured to Elder Miranel as she stood beside him. "No race should have survived such a world. And yet they not only survived, they thrived." Miranel nodded, her silver eyes thoughtful. "Perhaps that is why they answered us. A people forged by hardship does not look away from the suffering of others." But some of the Cathari were uneasy. "If they come from a death world," one counselor whispered, "then what kind of people are they? Will they be saviors, or something even the Dominion fears? The question lingered like a shadow. Far across the stars on Earth itself, humanity prepared. The call for aid had united them in a way nothing else had for generations. Old rivalries between nations were set aside. Ships once designed for trade were stripped and armed. Space stations became shipyards. Every corner of human civilization seemed to awaken with new purpose. Admiral Reyes, chosen to lead the fleet, stood in the command chamber of the battleship Resolute. He was not young, his hair touched with gray, but his eyes held the sharp fire of a man who had seen many storms. Around him, holographic displays showed the growing armada. Hundreds of ships gathering from across Earth and its colonies. An officer approached. "Admiral, many of these ships are outdated. Some are barely spaceworthy. If the Dominion truly controls the galaxy, we cannot hope to match them." Reyes turned to him with steady resolve. "We don't need perfection. We need courage. Dominion warships may be stronger, but they do not have what we have. Humans adapt. We turn weakness into strength. That will be our weapon." And indeed, humans were masters of adaptation. Where other species built ships to last for centuries, humanity had always worked with what they had. They patched broken engines with scrap, rerouted power through systems never meant to hold it, and created weapons from mining lasers and industrial tools. Nothing was wasted. Everything could be turned into a shield or a sword. Even the soldiers who volunteered came from every background. Some were trained officers. Others were simple workers, farmers, or pilots who had flown only cargo ships. But they shared one trait: determination. Every one of them knew that the Cathari had no hope without them. And every one of them refused to let another gentle race be erased from the stars. Meanwhile, the Dominion watched the preparations with contempt. From their command stations deep within conquered space, Dominion admirals reviewed the reports. "The humans?" one sneered. "Deathworld vermin. They are nothing but savages clinging to rocks. Do they truly think they can stand against us?" Another laughed. "Let them come. Their fleet will burn and the galaxy will learn that mercy is a lie." Yet beneath their arrogance, a note of caution stirred. The Dominion had crushed many civilizations, but never one from a death world. The archives spoke of humans as unpredictable, reckless, and impossible to fully understand. More than once, explorers who had met humans in distant colonies described them with a strange mix of fear and respect. "They smile even in danger," one report had said. "They laugh when others would cry. And when cornered, they do not surrender, they fight harder." The Dominion ignored these warnings. To them, strength was measured only in numbers and firepower. They had never believed in the power of resilience. Back on the last Cathari refuge world, the people gathered in underground shelters, listening to the transmissions. For the first time in weeks, the skies above were filled not with fire but with hope. Children asked their parents, "What are the humans like?" The parents could only smile weakly. "We do not know, but they are coming." Elder Miranel stood before the people and spoke words that would be remembered for generations. "Once we believed that knowledge alone would protect us. We were wrong, but perhaps the galaxy has another lesson for us. That even in the darkest night there are stars that will rise to defend the weak. The humans come not for conquest but for justice. Whatever happens, we will remember that they answered when no one else did." The word spread quickly, filling the Cathari with a fragile but growing strength. For the first time, their fear was matched by anticipation. On the journey across the stars, humanity's fleet grew stronger. Stations in neutral systems secretly provided fuel and supplies inspired by the boldness of Earth. Small colonies, once too afraid to defy the Dominion, sent volunteers. The fleet was no longer just Earth's. It was becoming a symbol for all who had been silenced. And among the crews, stories began to form. They spoke of the Cathari's suffering, of worlds that had burned, of children who had cried for help. These stories became fuel for the human spirit. Every engineer worked longer hours. Every pilot trained harder. Every soldier carried with them not just weapons, but a promise that they would not fail. As the Armada neared the edge of Dominion space, Admiral Reyes gathered his officers. The map of enemy territory filled the chamber, glowing red with countless threats. "We will not be welcomed," Reyes said calmly. "The Dominion believes us weak. They will throw everything at us to prove their power. But remember this, our strength is not in our ships. It is in our will. They cannot understand it and they cannot break it. The galaxy calls us Deathworlders. Let them see what that truly means. The officers saluted, their eyes burning with determination. In the shadows of the galaxy, whispers began to spread. The Deathworlders are coming, said one refugee to another. They are reckless, muttered a Dominion officer, trying to hide his unease. They are hope, whispered a Kethari child, looking to the stars. The reputation of humans grew before the fleet even arrived. To some, they were monsters from a brutal world. To others, they were saviors forged by hardship. But to everyone, they were no longer just another species. They were a force the galaxy could not ignore. And as the first human ships prepared to break into the besieged Kethari system, the people hiding underground heard the rumble of engines from the skies above. The Deathworlders had arrived. The skies over the last Kethari refuge world were filled with shadows. Dominion warships hung like dark blades in orbit, their weapons ready to fire at any sign of resistance. On the ground, the Kethari people huddled in shelters carved deep beneath the surface, listening to the distant rumble of bombardments. For weeks, despair had been their companion. But now something was different. The air seemed to tremble with a new energy, as though the stars themselves had begun to stir. Then it happened. The night sky lit up with streaks of fire as hundreds of ships emerged from hyperspace. The Dominion fleet sounded their alarms, thinking reinforcements had arrived. But the new ships were not theirs. They were strange, uneven, and carried the mark of a world long overlooked. The humans had come. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Reyes stood tall, his eyes fixed on the sight before him. The Dominion fleet was massive, with ships that gleamed like obsidian and bristled with weapons. Compared to them, the human armada looked almost fragile. Their ships were a patchwork of designs, old freighters armed with cannons, mining vessels refitted into warships, sleek fighters built by colonies far from Earth. Yet every one of them carried the same determination. Reyes gave his first command. Hold formation. Let the Kethari see us. The fleet spread across the sky in a wide arc, shields glowing faintly in the starlight. To the Kethari watching from the ground, it was like seeing a sunrise for the first time after endless night. In the council shelter, Elder Miranel clutched Captain Sorrell's arm. Her voice shook with disbelief. They came. Against all odds, they came. Sorrell's eyes filled with tears he had thought long lost. We are not alone. The Dominion, however, was not impressed. On the flagship of the Valar fleet, Admiral Thalek sneered at the sight. So these are the humans? This rabble of Deathworlders? They dare to challenge us? His officers laughed with him, confident in their power. Crush them, Thalek ordered. Let the galaxy see what happens when insects rise against lions. The Dominion fleet moved into attack formation, engines blazing, weapons charging. On the Resolute, the tension grew thick. Officers whispered quietly, running calculations, measuring the odds. Against such overwhelming numbers, victory seemed impossible. But Admiral Reyes did not waver. He turned to his crew and spoke with calm strength. Remember why we are here. Not for conquest, not for glory. We are here because a people cried for help and no one else answered. If we fall, let it be with honor. But we will not fall quietly. No more worlds will burn. The words spread quickly, repeated from ship to ship. Pilots whispered them as they powered their engines. Engineers muttered them as they tightened bolts with shaking hands. Soldiers gripped their weapons a little tighter, their fear replaced by resolve. The Dominion thought they faced only ships, but what they truly faced was the unbroken spirit of humanity. The battle began with a thunder that shook the stars. Dominion cruisers unleashed waves of plasma fire, turning the space between fleets into a storm of light. Human shields flared under the impact, and weaker ships shuddered as explosions ripped across their hulls, yet none turned back. Then the humans answered. From the flanks, swarms of small fighters darted forward, weaving through enemy fire with reckless precision. They were faster than Dominion gunners expected, diving between ships, striking engines and weapons arrays. Mining lasers, once used to cut through stone, burned through armor plates. Freighters launched improvised missiles built from fuel tanks and explosives. Even damaged ships rammed themselves into enemy lines, using their last breath to take down foes. Admiral Thalek snarled as his fleet began to stumble. They fight like beasts. No order, no discipline. But there was order, an order the Dominion could not see. The humans adapted in ways no strategy could predict. When one formation fell, another shifted to fill the gap. When weapons failed, crews improvised. Every loss became fuel for more determination. And above it all, the Resolute led the charge, her cannons pounding against ships many times her size. On the ground, the Cathari listened to the battle echoing through the heavens. At first, they trembled in fear that the humans would be destroyed like they had been. But as the hours passed, they realized something extraordinary. The humans were holding the line. Elder Miranel closed her eyes, whispering words of gratitude. Deathworlders they may be, but today they are our shield. Children pressed their faces to small windows, watching the sky blaze with light, whispering, "The humans are here. The humans are fighting for us." Inside the Dominion fleet, Admiral Thalic began to feel a chill. His officers reported losses. Ships destroyed not by superior firepower but by relentless persistence. Entire squadrons were being harassed into chaos by tiny human fighters. Communication lines were disrupted by strange signals, humans hacking their systems mid-battle. Traps appeared in asteroid fields, detonating mines that should not have been there. It made no sense. "They are weak," Thalic growled. "They are nothing. Why do they not break?" But the answer was simple. Humans did not break. Back aboard the Resolute, Admiral Reyes received reports of heavy losses. Ships were burning, crews sacrificed, and every victory came at a terrible cost. Yet the fleet still fought. He knew this battle was not about strength alone. It was about showing the Dominion and the galaxy that there was a force they could not defeat with fear. "Signal the Cathari," Reyes ordered. "Let them know we stand." In the Cathari shelters, the message arrived. The image of Admiral Reyes appeared on their screens, his uniform torn, his face marked by exhaustion, but his eyes alive with fire. "Cathari people," he said firmly, "you are not alone. As long as one human ship flies, we will fight for you." Tears streamed down the faces of the listeners. For a people who had known only despair, those words were like sunlight piercing through endless night. Captain Sorrell whispered, "We will survive, because they fight for us." The battle raged through the night and into the next day. By dawn, the Dominion fleet, though still vast, had begun to pull back. Not because they had been destroyed, but because they had been shaken. For the first time in memory, they had met an enemy that did not fear them. The humans had not won outright. Many of their ships floated as wrecks, their crews lost. But the Dominion had not triumphed either. The Cathari world still stood, and the humans still held the skies. It was a beginning. When the battle finally calmed, the Cathari emerged from their shelters. Above, they saw the battered but unbroken silhouettes of human ships drifting across the dawn. The sight brought cheers, laughter, and tears all at once. Elder Miranel raised her hands to the heavens and declared, "Hope has returned to the galaxy. The Deathworlders have arrived." And in that moment, the Cathari knew that their story had changed forever. The humans were no longer just a legend in the archives. They were real, they were allies, and they had brought with them a promise that no more worlds would burn alone. The Dominion fleet, once confident and unchallenged, now faced a new reality. They had underestimated the humans. They had assumed that a patchwork armada of Deathworlders could never threaten their dominance. But the Dominion had learned the hard way that humans were unlike any species they had ever fought. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Reyes surveyed the ongoing battle with calm intensity. Reports flashed across the holoscreens. Dominion frigates had been destroyed, several cruisers were crippled, and supply lines were in chaos. Human losses were heavy too, but the fleet adapted faster than the Dominion could anticipate. "The Dominion is confused," Reyes said quietly to his officers. "That confusion is our advantage. Keep pushing. Do not give them time to recover." Human ingenuity showed in every maneuver. The fleet split into smaller groups, striking Dominion ships in unexpected ways. Mining vessels, once slow and cumbersome, were fitted with high-powered thrusters and weapons scavenged from destroyed stations. Engineers developed makeshift cloaking techniques by bending light around their ships. Pilots flew daring routes through asteroid belts, using natural debris to hide from Dominion sensors and launch surprise attacks. Every battle became a lesson, and humans learned faster than their enemies could react. One Dominion cruiser would charge into the asteroid field, expecting to destroy the humans hiding there, only to find it ambushed by smaller human craft firing from multiple angles. Another warship would be lured into a trap where its own missiles were redirected by human hackers, destroying it from within. On the Dominion flagship, Admiral Thalek was growing furious. "How can this be?" he shouted at his officers. "They are weak, unorganized, and yet they continue to fight. Every plan we make fails." An officer hesitated. "Sir, their adaptability? It is unlike anything we've seen. They learn from every strike and adjust in moments." Thalek slammed his fist on the console. "This is impossible. They cannot be a threat. Prepare for full assault." But the humans had anticipated such aggression. Human intelligence units had observed Dominion strategies for weeks and developed countermeasures in real time. They predicted the Dominion's movements with uncanny accuracy, not because they had faster computers, but because their minds were trained by a harsh, unpredictable world. Every human had learned to survive chaos, and now, that skill was applied to warfare on a galactic scale. Meanwhile, the Cathari watched in awe from their refuge world. The skies, once filled with fire and doom, now glimmered with hope. Children pointed to human ships streaking across the heavens, shouting in delight. The elders wept quietly, realizing that their civilization might yet endure. Captain Sorrell could hardly believe it. "They are ordinary people from an ordinary world," he said to Elder Miranel. "And yet, they fight like gods." Miranel nodded, her gaze fixed on the stars. "They are not gods. They are human, and that is why they are extraordinary." On the front lines, small human fighter groups executed daring maneuvers that had once been considered suicidal. Squadrons would dive into the midst of superior forces, striking engines and weapon systems, then vanish before the Dominion could retaliate. Engineers on board capital ships rerouted power to reinforce shields at the last moment, absorbing attacks that should have destroyed them. One human pilot, Lieutenant Kara Voss, became a legend in the making. Flying a repurposed cargo ship, she dodged a swarm of Dominion fighters and used a gravity well from a nearby asteroid to fling her ship into the side of a cruiser. The explosion destroyed the cruiser's main weapons array and saved dozens of human and Cathari ships from annihilation. "Lieutenant Voss," Captain Rhea's voice boomed across comms. "Report!" "This is Lieutenant Voss, sir," she replied, grinning despite the smoke pouring from her ship. "The cruiser is down. We're ready for the next one." "Excellent," Rhea said. "Keep moving. We will not stop until the Dominion knows we are not to be underestimated." As battles raged across the system, the Dominion realized that their usual tactics were failing. Their fleets, built for overwhelming firepower and disciplined maneuvers, could not adapt to the unpredictability of human strategies. They found themselves trapped, manipulated, and outsmarted at every turn. In desperation, Thalek ordered a weapon thought to be the ultimate terror, a massive energy cannon capable of obliterating entire fleets in a single blast. The Dominion believed that this final strike would crush the humans once and for all, but humans had anticipated it. Using small, fast ships and ingenuity, they created decoys and shields that absorbed the cannon's energy. The weapon misfired and struck one of Thalek's own cruisers, tearing it apart in a spectacular explosion. The Dominion fleet recoiled in disbelief. Human victories inspired others across the galaxy. Colonies under Dominion control began small uprisings, striking at supply depots and communication hubs. News of the human armada's success spread, fueling hope that resistance was possible. The Deathworlders were no longer just a fleet. They were a symbol of defiance and courage. Back on the Cathari world, the Council realized that the tide was turning. The humans were more than allies, they were saviors. Captain Sorrell stood among the elders and spoke softly. "They fight not for power, not for reward, but because it is right. This is something no Dominion weapon can break." Miranel smiled, tears streaming down her face. "The galaxy has never seen such resolve. Perhaps we have underestimated the human spirit for too long." Even as the Dominion scrambled to regroup, the humans continued to press the advantage. Battles became a series of calculated strikes and daring rescues. A crippled human frigate would use a patchwork shield to protect a cluster of Cathari transports. Freighters retrofitted with plasma cannons would take down cruisers much larger than themselves. And every time a human ship fell, another seemed to take its place, as if loss only strengthened their resolve. "Deathworlders," Thalek muttered bitterly. "They survive everything, and still they fight." In the midst of the chaos, human leaders communicated with Cathari officials directly. Messages of encouragement and strategy were shared. Children in shelters were given hope, and families were reminded that their suffering was not in vain. Human ingenuity and compassion worked together, fighters saving lives, engineers building shields, medics attending the wounded, all in a coordinated effort. Captain Sorrell watched in wonder. They are not just soldiers, they are a force of life itself. Days turned into weeks, and the Dominion's confidence began to crumble. Losses mounted, morale sank, and fear spread among their officers. The humans, though battered and exhausted, continued to push forward. Every victory inspired more humans to join the fight. Even damaged ships were repaired mid-battle, systems improvised, and strategies adapted on the fly. Admiral Reyes knew that the turning point had come. "We are no longer defending," he said to his officers. "We are leading. Every attack we make now shapes the future of the galaxy. The Dominion is learning that fear alone cannot rule forever." The Kethari world itself began to see the first signs of life returning. Where fires had burned and cities had been destroyed, humans organized repair teams to assist Kethari engineers. Temporary shelters were built, and civilians who had hidden in fear emerged to help. Though small, these acts of rebuilding sent a powerful message. The humans fought not for conquest, but to restore life, Miranel whispered. Watching the humans coordinate repairs, they bring more than victory. They bring hope, and that is more powerful than any weapon. By the end of the 4th week, the Dominion had been forced to retreat from the Kethari system. Though they were not entirely defeated, their fleet was weakened, scattered, and demoralized. Human and Kethari survivors began the slow process of repair, tending to wounded ships and rebuilding the damaged colonies. Captain Sorrell turned to Admiral Reyes. "You have done the impossible," he said. "You have turned the tide." Reyes shook his head. "Not I alone. The fleet, the pilots, the engineers, they all made it happen. Humanity fights as one, but we fight for more than ourselves. We fight for life, for hope, for those who cannot fight. That is why we prevail." As the stars slowly returned to calm around the Kethari system, the survivors looked to the humans with awe. Children pointed and whispered, "The Deathworlders. They are real." And for the first time in centuries, the Kethari knew that their world, and perhaps the galaxy, had a chance. The tide had turned. The Deathworlders had shown the galaxy that courage, ingenuity, and resilience could overcome even the most overwhelming odds. The Dominion fleet was broken. Its warships, once the terror of the galaxy, floated like shadows of their former glory. Many had been destroyed, others crippled, and morale was shattered. For the first time, the Dominion leaders knew fear, not in their enemies but in themselves. Admiral Thalek sat alone in his command chamber, staring at the blinking lights of his remaining fleet. Communications were jammed or intercepted. Orders that once demanded obedience were ignored. And everywhere he looked, human and Kethari ships still moved with precision and determination. "This cannot be," he muttered. "We are the Dominion. No one defies us, no one." Yet the evidence was undeniable. The humans, the Deathworlders, had not only survived, they had pushed back the greatest force the galaxy had known. Thalek realized that his empire, built on fear and power, was crumbling before the determination of a species he had underestimated. On the Kethari world, celebrations were cautious but heartfelt. Fires were extinguished, the wounded were cared for, and civilians emerged from shelters to see the stars once again. Children laughed and pointed at the human fleet above them, still battered but standing proud. Elder Miranel approached Captain Sorrell as they watched the horizon. "They have done more than fight," she said softly. "They have restored our hope, and they have shown the galaxy what courage looks like." Sorrell nodded. "We owe them our lives, and not just our lives, but our future." Human ships gathered near the remnants of the Dominion fleet. Admiral Reyes stood on the bridge of the Resolute, his gaze calm but unwavering. His officers watched as Dominion vessels transmitted a desperate message, a plea for mercy. Thalek's voice echoed through the comm channels. We surrender. We ask for mercy. Spare our ships, spare our people. We will yield to your authority, please. Have mercy." The humans had seen countless pleas before, from species that begged for their lives after the Dominion had destroyed them. But this was different. The humans understood the weight of mercy, and they understood justice. Reyes turned to his officers. "They ask for mercy," he said, "but they gave none to the Kethari. They burned worlds, destroyed families, and spread fear across the stars. What do we do? Some officers whispered that the Dominion should be destroyed entirely, that nothing left of their empire should survive. Others argued that mercy could be a tool, an example that humanity did not seek conquest but justice. Reyes raised his hand. Silence fell across the bridge. "We are not conquerors," he said firmly. "We are protectors. We fight to defend life, not to destroy it. The Dominion will not rise again as it did, but we will show the galaxy that justice is stronger than fear. Prepare a message." The humans transmitted their response across the Dominion fleet. "We will not destroy you," the message read. "Your fleets are disarmed. Your worlds freed. You will leave the Cathari system and return home. Interfere again, and you will face consequences. Remember this day. The galaxy now knows that cruelty cannot rule forever." Thalek stared at the message in disbelief. "This cannot be," he whispered. His officers looked to him, unsure what to do. They had expected annihilation or humiliation. They had received neither. Instead, they faced something far more powerful, a restraint born of strength. The human fleet allowed Dominion vessels to depart, watching carefully to ensure compliance. Ships once feared as unstoppable weapons drifted away, powerless to resist. Some Dominion soldiers muttered among themselves, realizing for the first time that their empire had been beaten not just by firepower, but by the spirit of a species they had underestimated. Back on the Cathari world, life slowly began to rebuild. Humans worked alongside Cathari engineers to repair ships, restore habitats, and care for the wounded. Civilians who had hidden for months emerged, astonished at the resilience of their allies. Captain Sorrell walked through the streets, speaking to families and children. "The humans came when we had no hope. They risked everything to protect us. Their courage saved our people." Elder Miranel stood nearby, looking at the fleet above. "They are more than warriors," she said. "They are a lesson. One day all the galaxy will remember this moment." The Dominion, meanwhile, returned to their home systems shaken and humbled. They were no longer the unstoppable force they once had been. And everywhere they went, whispers spread, stories of humans who came from a harsh, deadly world and fought with courage, creativity, and compassion. Tales of Deathworlders who faced impossible odds and emerged victorious traveled faster than fleets. The galaxy began to change. Systems that had once cowered under Dominion rule dared to speak of rebellion. Star nations that had been silenced for centuries felt hope stir in their hearts. The humans had not just fought a battle, they had sparked a movement. Admiral Reyes returned to the Resolute's observation deck, watching the Cathari world below. Fires were replaced with lights of reconstruction. Children played in safe spaces. Families hugged and cried with relief. The Deathworlders had come not to conquer but to protect. He spoke quietly to his second-in-command, Commander Alara. "This is what it means to be human. Strength tempered with compassion. Power used for protection, not domination. We are not heroes. Only guardians," Alara nodded. "The galaxy will never forget this. The Cathari will remember, and so will others." Reyes gazed into the stars. "And we will be ready. If darkness ever rises again, humanity will be there. The Deathworlders will answer the call." The Cathari Council held a ceremony to honor their saviors. Humans, though weary and battered, were present. Captain Sorrell addressed the crowd, speaking on behalf of both the Cathari and the humans. "You sent out a call when all seemed lost," he said. "And they answered. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because it was right. They fought for life, for justice, and for hope. Today the galaxy has learned that courage cannot be measured by weapons alone." Elder Miranel added, "The Deathworlders have shown us that strength and mercy can coexist. The Cathari people will never forget what they have done, and the galaxy will remember it too." The crowd cheered, not just for victory, but for the promise of a future free from tyranny. Weeks later, the human fleet departed the Cathari system, leaving behind repaired ships and restored cities. The Cathari waved from orbit, and from the surface their hearts filled with gratitude and admiration. Captain Sorrell watched the human fleet disappear into hyperspace. "They are gone," he said softly, "but they have left a legacy we will carry forever." Elder Miranel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not gone. They are always with us, in our hope, in our courage, and in every life they saved. The galaxy has been changed forever." Far across the stars, rumors spread of a species from a death world who fought not for conquest, but for justice. Systems once silent now spoke of hope. Children grew up hearing tales of humans who risked everything to protect others. The Deathworlders had proven that even the smallest call for help could echo across the galaxy. And that courage, ingenuity, and compassion could turn the tide against even the most powerful empires. And so, for the first time in centuries, the galaxy knew peace. Not absolute peace, for challenges would always rise, but the knowledge that there was a species willing to stand for what was right. The Deathworlders had arrived. The Dominion had been humbled, and every civilization, no matter how small, understood that courage and morality could never be destroyed.